So again, hello and welcome to the webinar. I want to talk to you about three common pain points with IT vendors and how to solve them. But before I get started, I want to give you a little bit of background about me. So here's my agenda. After the introduction, we're going to go through the three pain points, which are scope creep, insufficient risk management, and poor communications. But let's give you a little bit of trivia. So who am I? So I've worked in corporate IT for, I hate to admit, 20 plus years. Um, I left the corporate arena to start Plumleaf VPA. I figured if I was going to still be on the hamster wheel, maybe I'd make my own wheel. So that was the inspiration. And I have to admit, I am an IT geek. I love the tech. I love the gadgets. If I can do something to create with it, I'm in heaven. So I am a techie. And then tying all of that back to Plumleaf, I do have a heart for project managers and anyone in the project management space. So when I was a project manager, the challenge was you are accountable for everything that happens in the project, but you really have very little authority. But at the same time, the project manager was the one throat to choke. And that phrase just stuck in my head, one throat to choke. So if anything happens, I'm going to be blamed for it as a project manager. And so just thinking about all of those experiences, I kind of thought, what can I do to help vendors who are third-party consultants, bringing in their project management team, or even working with clients who have their own internal project management teams? How can I help those people in that space? So that's really the goal of Plumleaf Vendor Performance Assessment. So let's get into it. So scope creep, what is it? What it really is your project starts like this. And after you kind of get into it, it grows to be this big and this big and this big. So let me give you an example or two. So let's say you have a project and the requirements are, I want a software application that's going to allow me to enter my monthly budget for my department. It's going to print out reports and give me an analysis. Okay, that's how it starts. Then they come back and say, no, no, no. I want my report broken out by month, but instead of regular calendar year, make it fiscal year. Oh, and I want the percentage to increase year over year at about 5.2% so I can see a trend analysis. And can you do a report that gives me a chart on that? And then can you break that out by cost center and business unit? And actually, I want to do some additional projections. You see where I'm going with this? You started here, then it got here and here and here. That's basically scope creep. So what causes it? Common causes. So first of all, unfortunately, sometimes the people who are asking for this thing to be developed, they're really not sure what they really want. They have an idea, but it's not clear. The requirements aren't clear. They're not quite definite on the end. And then I see I have a guest. What else is a common cause is the project is more complex than you originally thought. So you thought it was, yeah, I'm going to make pancakes. No, no, I'm going to make a souffle. So it's a lot more complicated than you originally thought. And then you don't have sufficient change control. So if you keep changing the scope and adding to the scope and building to the scope, it just grows out of control. So what do you do to remediate? Well, first of all, you need to verify and document your requirements. You have to document your requirements and verify, and not with just the project team. Verify those requirements with the client. Are you both on the same page in terms of what needs to happen? And then change is going to happen, right? There's going to be some scope creep. There are going to be adjustments. That's what happens when you're developing something. So you need to implement a stringent change control process. That's key. You have to do it. And then what's your end goal? Document the definition of done and make sure you've got senior leadership or whoever's paying for this. Make sure they're in agreement for a definition of done. That is so important. So, next topic, insufficient risk management. What is it? Let me differentiate between risk and issues. So if you have issues, that's a problem. It has already happened and you need to handle it. You need to address it. Risk is what if? That's potential problems, potential issues. And so if it's insufficient, let's get into those common causes as to why. Well, first of all, you kind of ignore the probability that certain things can even happen. Kind of like, yeah, we'll deal with it when it happens. And then you don't assess the impact. So, like, what happens if? Again, if you don't assess the impact of it, that could really wreak havoc on your project. And then you have insufficient mitigation strategy. So if any of these things happen, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to handle it? Are you going to accept it? Is it critical to shutting the project down? Is it minimal and you have a workaround? What is your mitigation strategy? And then, of course, there's lack of communication. So if you're not communicating about the possibility of certain risks to the whole project team and other stakeholders, it's going to be downhill from there. So then remediation, what can you do about it? Get together with your team and your clients to identify the things that could go wrong. If you really just take some time to think about it, you can kind of come up with a solid list of things that could go wrong. What are the risks? And then what's the probability of those things happening? You need to document the probability of it. And then how severe is it? So if it's a small risk, maybe there's a little impact, maybe it's medium impact, you need to outline all of those things. And then what is your mitigation approach? How are you going to handle it? What are you going to do about it? All of that needs to be planned out. And let me throw in a shameless plug. We have tools and processes and templates to help with things like this so that you don't have to think about, well, how am I going to structure this risk management thing, a risk register? How am I going to track my scope and build a change control process? Longleaf has those kinds of tools and techniques to help you. So just wanted to throw that in there. And so let's talk about the next one. Poor communication. I cannot stress enough how poor communications can just, I hate to say it, just jack up your whole project. Common causes are, and I'm going to start from that bottom bullet because I think that's key. Lack of structure on how you're going to communicate and what you're going to communicate. If you just talk about it, how are you documenting it? Who is your audience when you're talking about these things? You need to have a structure in place. And then you need to get feedback from not only your project management team, you need to get feedback from the executives, feedback from other stakeholders. Like, who is this project going to impact? You need to get feedback. It needs to be two-way communication, and it needs to be documented and up to date. If you're looking at stale communication or information, meaning, yeah, that happened a few weeks ago, what's happening today? What has happened in the last couple of hours or even yesterday? These are some common causes of poor communications. So, how do you fix it? Well, one, you've got to identify what it is you're communicating. You should communicate status, issues, risk, scope, requirements, change. What phase are you in the project? Are you getting agreement? Is everybody in alignment? What questions do people have? And you need to think about the audience that you're communicating with. What I mean by that is if you're talking to executives, they do not want to know the details. Give them the gist. Here's what's happening. Here's where we are. Here are some of the bigger issues that we need help with. And are we on track or not? And on track means on track with schedule and budget. You need to think about your audience when you're communicating. And then how often? Are you going to talk to people weekly, monthly? Surely monthly is not enough. You have monthly meetings, but you need to figure out what's a good regular communication cadence, like how often. And then what kind of modalities, communication modalities? Is it all going to be just documented? Are you going to have webinars where you have someone taking down notes? Are you going to post things? Are you going to have more interaction? There are several different methods of communication. And the last thing I want to say about this, and this is key, establish a single source of truth. If you're storing your information and your documents somewhere on your drive, and then some of the other project team is saying, oh, I'm going to store my information on Confluence. Oh, no, well, I put mine on the network drive. The project management leader, so that's the project manager, maybe you have an executive, you need to determine the one place where all of this information is stored and it needs to be organized so you can get to it quickly. That single source of truth in terms of communication is paramount. So those are the things that I wanted to talk to you about in terms of scope creep, risk management, and poor communications. Those are some of the things that no matter what project I was leading, even when I ran a PMO, those were some key things in terms of issues that I always saw, I always ran into, and it wasn't just with third-party vendors or consultants. It was also internally. So that's what I wanted to share with you. So with that, that concludes my shorter presentation, but I wanted to just put it out there. Are there any questions? If you have questions after you watch this video and you want to communicate with me about it, you want to have a discussion, feel free to email me. We can do a phone call or whatever your preferred mode of communication is. And then I have a gift. So if you can scan this QR code will take you to my website and you can download the free Excel issues log just for your attendance. If you can't download it, I will pop the information in the chat right now, and you'll have the link to my website where you can get your free gift, my email, my social media, my LinkedIn, all of that. So let me see if I can pop that in the chat right now. That is not it. Let me go to my screen. I am going to stop sharing. And thank you again for attending. I appreciate your time. And let me pop back to the chat. And here's all of my contact information. So that your gift, that's the first link. You can go to my site. Again, you can download your free gift. And if you feel the need to contact me, if you have any more questions, there's my social media. Okay, I think that concludes my presentation. That's all I wanted to cover for today. I am going to stop the recording and say thanks again for attending.